KP 432, continue for runway 32 right, I'll call you back. Break Fox Bravo Victor Oscar India. Passe avec le sol 121.9, au revoir.
This gentleman is sending signals. And this gentleman is also sending signals. But whereas this pilot uses electrical impulses to send his messages, this signalman relies on more traditional technology. Yes, the comparison is entirely fair, for the levers, pulleys and wires that were satisfactory in a bygone age can no longer satisfy today's need for the instant, precise and totally reliable signalling of control surfaces. So the heavy and complicated linkage of rods, cables and pulleys, which was once the only way to control the aircraft, gives way to a simple electrical signaling system, fly-by-wire.
It certainly makes it more pleasant to fly. I love flying our fly-by-wire aeroplanes. They're very similar to flying a small aeroplane again, even though this one's quite a large aeroplane.
Effective and inevitable. Let's go back to the very start of aviation and see how this new system virtually invented itself. 1891, and Otto Lilienthal was the first to demonstrate controlled flight. This he achieved by moving his body weight, a technique still used by today's hang glider pilots. But with the arrival of powered aircraft, courtesy the Wright brothers, something more practical was needed. So the pilot used a stick linked to cables to activate the distant control surfaces.
Aeroplanes were very small, so they didn't need much force to move the flying controls. Then they became, aeroplanes became bigger, they needed bigger muscles, and they had a big wheel to move the flying controls.
And this mechanism did the job so well that it began to look as if control yokes, wires and pulley wheels would become permanent features like the wing itself. But into the 30s and 40s, aeroplanes became so large and the control loads so heavy that the pilot's strength was pushed to the limit. To help him, this aircraft had electrical assistance built into a section of its elevator controls. And this aircraft, which appeared some 5 years later, had electric servo assisters on all flying controls and the throttles too.
Finally, aeroplanes got even bigger, and they needed hydraulic help to move the control surfaces. But we still kept this big stick because of problems with friction forces, with a long cable run that went right the way down to the back of the aeroplane.
The Princess, which first flew in 1952, was a massive step forward in every sense. The large control surfaces were moved by electrically driven hydraulic pumps. So, artificial muscle became accepted practice in virtually all the new jet airliners, providing safe and easy handling despite the vastly increased weights and speeds. But it wasn't just the pilot who sent commands to those mechanical muscles. First, there was the autopilot, perfected in the late 30s. In fact, the idea goes back to 1914, when Lawrence Sperry demonstrated his gyroscopic stabilizer in a Curtiss flying boat. and won the international safety competition in Paris. Once the concept of the autopilot was universally accepted, an obvious step was to complement its gyroscopic data with signals sent up from the ground.
200 feet. If it coming down.
This made possible automatic landing, a system for guiding aircraft safely in, even in thick fog. The system worked well and would become fully established in service throughout the world. Thus, the dependability of electrical signaling, albeit via radio waves, had been convincingly demonstrated. Now, the way became clear to reassess the mechanical linkages, transferring the control commands to the electrically actuated hydraulic motors that work the flying surfaces. As electrical signals were already being used to control the motors, the logical step now was to send the message to them direct from the control column by electrical wire, resulting in a far simpler and lighter system. And without the need to exert muscle power, the conventional control yokes could be replaced by small side sticks. So, electrical signaling, a daring new idea? Hardly. The electrical signaling of controls and systems is now standard practice in many areas of transportation and industry, particularly where safety is paramount. Inevitably, the trend towards fly-by-wire in civil aviation began. Concorde was the first, though still with mechanical backup. Then came the more advanced systems on Airbus Industries A310 and A300-600, controlling the operation of the flaps, slats and spoilers. All of which led, inevitably, to an airliner, the A320, that employed fly-by-wire for all control surfaces.
Now we have electric signaling, and I'm back to my small side stick, which I move with my fingertips, just like that. That moves the aeroplane.
At last, total reliance on electrical signaling. Fine. But the question is often asked, what if the power supply fails? The answer is that all modern airliners require an electrical supply to stay flying, and that Airbus Industries aircraft are typical in having no fewer than 6 different power sources. The use of electrical signaling opened the way to an entirely new computer-aided safety feature, usually known as flight envelope protection.
I don't like the word protection for the flight envelope. What I like is thinking in terms of I get the maximum maneuvering when I want it, easily, instantaneously, and without worrying of stalling the aeroplane or exceeding its G limit.
It's happening on the roads too. Automatic systems are becoming commonplace in automobiles to help us cope in difficult situations. The driver, or pilot, makes a decision, and the computer analyzes the forces involved and provides the optimum response. You get what you want.
There we are, turning on a sixpence. To illustrate what I mean about going to maximum performance easily, let's just slow down to our so-called alpha max, which is just before the stall. First of all, I need to reduce the engine thrust. Then the aeroplane slows down, and still with quite light forces, I pull the stick fully back, and I keep pulling it back. There we are, going back towards 100 knots. And all I'm doing is holding the stick fully back, and the aeroplane will stabilize just above the stall. Feel it's buffeting a little bit. That shows we're not very far away from the stall, but we won't stall. We can sit there all day, as long as I put some power on to stop going down.
But what if the computer should fail? In this control system, there are 5 computers, and each can be used to assist the pilot on its own. In fact, each computer consists of 2 separate units, the one constantly monitoring the other. As yet another safety precaution, the computers are produced to different designs by two different manufacturers and are programmed by independent teams using different computer languages, all of which makes it virtually impossible for the same fault to affect all the computers at once. But despite all this, and that billions to one chance happens and all the computers fail, the aircraft can still be held on course using the mechanical linkages to the tailplane trim and to the hydraulic rudder actuators. And the computers make yet another important contribution too.
They help me by making the aeroplane much more pleasant to fly. They smooth out all the nasty characteristics that some aeroplanes have, like big trim changes with speed or weight, changes in pitching and moments with applications of thrust. That can all be taken out by these computers.
Bill, does this smoothing out effect apply throughout Airbus Industries' fly-by-wire family?
Yes, they make the aeroplanes very, very similar to fly. And that means that the 320 flies like the 330, even though the 320 is less than half the size of the 330. The 330 flies like the 340, even though it's got two engines as opposed to four engines.
And are there any benefits that would appeal to the airlines as well as the pilot?
There are lots of benefits. If we just think in terms of operating the aeroplane, the training courses can be made much shorter because there's so many things similar between the aeroplanes. And then we can use the same pool of pilots to fly the smaller aeroplane and the larger aeroplane, depending on the needs of the company.
But what does this fly-by-wire system with its small side stick mean to you as a pilot?
It means that I can be much more delicate on the controls. Basically, with fly-by-wire, when the stick's in the center like that, the aeroplane continues where it's going. It doesn't change its attitude, it doesn't start banking or anything. When I want to bank, I just move the side stick with delicate finger force like that. I'm back to the center. And when I put it back to the center, it continues flying wings level again. If I put it back to wings level, equally, nose down, nose up.
Sending signals is at the heart of every transport system. But old ways inevitably disappear into obscurity, to be replaced by new ideas more appropriate to the needs of the day. Electrical signaling is now the right way for all advanced forms of transport.
Like all pilots, I like flying any aeroplane, but I prefer these aeroplanes. They're very pleasant to fly. Fingertip control is very nice.